So I know I'm a little late to the party here, but I finally got a chance to see what people had been yapping about. I watched all three seasons of the show this summer. I turned pretty over on Prime Video, and boy, do I have some things to get off my chest. Even though there were moments where I was like, this is actually an okay show, there was just so many more that just irritated the hell out of me, and it seems like the feeling is pretty mutual when I hear other people talk about it. So let's get into it because this show just reminds me of my teenage years and how my frontal lobe not being fully developed really affected decision making and processing information. So let's start with season 1. The entire first season just reminded me of the Netflix show My Life with the Walter Boys, where the two brothers, in that case Alex and Cole, are just fighting over Jackie, with Cole acting like the brother that's too cool to notice her but secretly likes her. And then of course there's Alex, who's a lot less suave but is very open about his feelings towards her. And in the show, I think Conrad would be Cole. You know? Jeremiah would probably be Alex, and then Belly or Isabel would be Jackie. But in this case, they all grew up together, including Belly's brother Steven. Their moms, Susanna and Laurel, have been best friends for years, so their kids naturally became friends, and Belly was automatically just seen as a little sister rather than someone either Jeremiah or Conrad would be seeing anything romantic happening with. But all of a sudden, one summer, she and Steven come to their vacation home like they usually do every year, and now everything has supposedly changed. Now she's pretty because she's grown up a little more and took off her glasses, basically. Now, out of nowhere, the boys start looking at her differently, but it was Conrad that Belly always had a crush on, but he never really saw her in that way, or at least so she thought. But Conrad is like the buzzkill in the room, the one who acts interested when he feels like it and turns around and makes it seem like he never tried to make a move, obviously making things conflicting. One minute he's trying to kiss the girl, then she even goes out and ends things with her little summer fling that she had with the boy that she met at a party because she thinks things are about to kick off with Conrad. But then he turns around and starts acting weird again, so she claims she's no longer waiting on him. But then she runs into something really messy with Jeremiah, and things are about to get super weird with everyone else. But Susanna is ecstatic because she just wanted to see at least one of her boys happy. And because this was basically going to be her last summer, being that her cancer had returned, and she had told no one besides Laurel, she wanted Belly to participate in the debutante ball. And I'm not gonna lie, in the beginning it was kind of irritating hearing Laurel and the boys keep trying to talk Belly out of doing it, saying that it wasn't going to be her thing, when this girl could clearly make the decision herself if it's not for her or not. I just hate when people try to talk for you and tell you what you're not interested in or what you don't like and what you like. It's like, I never asked you to do that, you know? So that was kind of irritating to watch because I've had people do that for me and speak on my behalf in the past, and it's just like, can you be quiet please? Like, let me decide, okay? But now there's an unspoken battle going on between Conrad and Jeremiah over Belly until the very end when they find out about Susanna's cancer. But then in the beginning of the second season, we find out that Belly and Conrad had reconnected. Big surprise there. So now we get into season 2. So Belly tells Conrad everything about Jeremiah, and somehow he's just okay with their little fling. But now Jeremiah is avoiding them because he wants her, and it's just messy, and it just stays messy for most of this season. They pretty much drag everyone into their turmoil, with Belly constantly getting close to Jeremiah, who I really don't trust to be consistent either because he's a flirt. But then you have Conrad, who she ended up dating for a little bit after Susanna's death, and he's been all over the place with his emotions, messing up her prom, taking her virginity, and then just running off into the night afterwards. So now Conrad and Jeremiah are losing the beach house because Susanna's sister, Julia, doesn't have the finances to keep it. So she's selling it, and they're all at the house trying to find a way to talk her out of it, but in the end they realize they can't. So naturally they throw a party, and it brings up a lot of raw emotions, especially when they find out from their cousin Sky that their aunt Julia was trying to get the new buyers to agree to renting the house out to them every summer, but then Conrad just wants to give up and move on. Jeremiah finally calls out Conrad for being what he truly is, which is a coward, and I totally agree in that moment, considering how he was basically playing with Belly, luring her in just to run her off, and do the same thing over and over again. He never has the courage to really go after what he wants unless there's someone there to convince him it's a good idea. It's like he doesn't really have the guts to just make a dang decision. And of course, Belly, blinded by what she sees as a cute face and nice eyes, just keeps coming on back, but using people in between time to ease the pain of the constant rejection, with Jeremiah kind of being one of them. And it basically turns into a repetitive theme throughout the whole show, and it's not really even entertaining drama. It just gets annoying, and I'm sure it's even more annoying for the people around them. Somehow the boys manage to convince their dad, along with some help from Laurel and Julia, surprisingly, to move some money around to purchase the beach house. And Conrad reveals that he got into Stanford, his dream school, but now he needs to take the entrance exam, and Belly believes that if she sticks around to help him study, then she'll be able to walk away from the situation. But of course, after a whole night of studying, here she is trying to tell him that she still has feelings for him, but he falls asleep. So of course, the next day they go to drop Conrad off for his exam, and Belly basically gets bored. She spouts a few lies to Jeremiah about wanting to be with him, even though she knows good and darn well she's only trying to fill the void of Conrad. Then when he decides to just come running back, Jeremiah is just thrown to the side. The selfishness on Belly's end is pretty crazy, but Conrad catches her and Jeremiah making out, and now she's running after him and trying to apologize when it was Jeremiah she was apologizing to in season 1. And I honestly wouldn't put it past Belly to just be dragging Jeremiah along to get Conrad's attention, as much as she may claim to be above it, because the girl is super messy. She keeps trying to convince Jeremiah that what they have is real and nothing's changed and it's him who she wants, and I'm like, girl, he's who you want for the moment. Your wants seem to change every 5 minutes. Same goes for Conrad. The flippity flopping they both were doing is just draining, especially when he tries to convince Jeremiah at the end of the season that he's going to let Belly go, and deep down he knows he has no intention of doing any such thing. But in the end of season 2, Conrad sort of lets Belly go in the most dramatic fashion, and then she runs right into Jeremiah's arms as if Conrad isn't going to always live rent-free in her mind. By season 3, Belly's going to college and seems to be in an okay place with Jeremiah, but now she's considering turning down a study abroad opportunity that's not offered to just any student, just because she's worried about not seeing him all the time, like she does now. Her friend Taylor has to be the one to talk some sense into her and tell her to just take her butt to Paris for that program, and Jeremiah will just have to figure it out. Which I totally agree with, because girl, why are you giving up such a good opportunity? Like, he'll be there when you come back, hopefully, you know? But Jeremiah and Conrad seem to both have this crappy habit of completely shutting down and retreating into themselves and their feelings and not communicating what exactly is going on. They just automatically shut people out, but I think people overlook it when it comes to Jeremiah. They just see Conrad as the only one with that issue. But then we find out that Jeremiah also hooked up with another girl over the spring break while he and Belly were on some sort of break from their relationship, but Belly thinks that he should have known that that wasn't really a break. And before I actually figured out what went down, in my head, I was like, girl, how the heck was he supposed to know that you weren't on a break? Like, you were out here flipping and flopping every other day. But yeah, we find out like, yeah, this wasn't really a break, but you know, we're gonna get to that part. But to be fair, she also knew that he was a little bit of a 304. We knew that from the first season. He was a little, he was a flirt. He was out there. He was dillying and dallying with a lot of folks. And she knew that. She said it herself that he's the biggest flirt and doesn't really take anything seriously in season 1. So why she thought he would take this relationship serious is beyond my understanding, but we find out that this so-called break wasn't really a break. They just hadn't spoken for a week because they got into an argument about him going to Cabo with some of his fraternity friends and also some of the sorority girls, which, to be honest, I wouldn't want my man going on no trip with a bunch of girls if I'm not there. But now Belly is having this whole breakdown and won't even talk to Taylor because she thinks she knew something about the whole cheating scandal because the person he cheated with was one of her sorority sisters. However, what I absolutely hated to hear was when Jeremiah says to his friend that Belly was his whole world after his mom died. Besides it being a little cringe, I don't know if you should make someone your whole world. I feel like it's okay for them to be important to you, but for them to be the center of your universe, that's worrisome. Because hypothetically speaking, what if something happened to them? What if you find out that they did something that would destroy you if you ever found out about it? And that's when we find out that Belly wasn't so innocent either. Not a surprise there, but she didn't go as far as Jeremiah did. But apparently there was something that happened during a Christmas break, and she'd gone down to Cousins or the beach house. Conrad ended up being there by surprise, so yeah. But she didn't go as far as Jeremiah yet again. She didn't do all that. But then Steven gets into an accident that lands him in the hospital after a dumb fight with Taylor, all because he wanted to stop sneaking around behind their partners' backs and and just be together, because why cheat when you can just break things off and be together? But I'm not really here to talk about them. Let's get back to that annoying lover triangle, shall we? So shortly after finding out that everything is going to be okay with Steven after that accident, Belly and Jeremiah not only make up, but he even proposes and she accepts. To say that escalated quickly is an understatement. But in that moment, I was like, let's just see where this goes. But at this point, she doesn't really want to tell anyone. But Belly does end up spilling the news to Taylor, and she dang near starts choking. And she's like, wait, what? Because even she realizes how ridiculous this all sounds. However, she does end up backpedaling on that take, which is annoying because she was spot on. But when it comes to Susanna's memorial, Belly and Jeremiah decided that it's the perfect time to tell their parents the news, and the immediate reaction is, are you joking? And are you pregnant? Conrad is just sitting there like his whole life imploded and he was about to pass out. In that moment, obviously, Jeremiah and Belly, they're disappointed by the reaction. But what the hell did you think they were gonna say when neither of you have jobs, a place to live, a career, nothing? They both still rely on their parents' money to survive. The idea was kind of ridiculous from the start, considering also that Belly still has this eternal flame burning for Conrad. It's even funnier when Jeremiah tries to get him on board to be his best man, and Belly still thinks that she's going to convince her mom that this is a good idea, because everything about this was all wrong. It's also funny how when you're at that age, you think you know so much, and your parents are just the Debbie Downers and the buzzkills, but when you look back on it when you're now their age, you realize that they were actually making a whole lot of sense. But back to our throuple of perpetual sorrow. Belly has a fight with Laurel because she's still not caving, so she and Jeremiah eventually run to the beach house where they find Conrad after he's been completely ignoring Jeremiah's calls to be his co-best man with Steven. But Conrad tells Jeremiah to his face that he thinks this whole wedding thing is ridiculous, which it is. But when Jeremiah leaves to go back to his internship, Conrad overhears Belly crying about the situation with her mom, and he caves and tells Jeremiah to count him in as a best man. Now it's just Belly and Conrad in the beach house for a prolonged amount of time, and Ish is super awkward because he's trying his hardest to avoid her, and Belly is also getting a taste of how outrageous wedding prices can get, while Jeremiah is just pretty much trying to get on his dad's good side back at work. But Belly just ends up basically planning this wedding with Conrad, and he has to constantly tell himself not to help or step in because she's getting upset and emotional. But of course he can't help himself. He basically becomes co-chair of wedding planning as well, forgetting that he's not even the one getting married. They're out here stopping for peaches on the side of the street, cooking dinner together, drinking together, and Conrad is just over here in make-believe land envisioning things, up until Jeremiah comes in and he remembers, oh yeah, Belly isn't with me, and it's just painful to watch considering she could have been with Conrad if he wasn't his usual self screwing things up. Laurel eventually comes around, but before Belly and Jeremiah's big day, this girl is cleaning Conrad's wound he got from wiping out on his surfboard, and things heat all the way up, but then nothing happens. However, after that, Conrad just happens to get injured several more times, but the thought definitely crossed my and also Belly's mind if he was doing this for attention. Or was I just looking too closely into it? I don't know. But everyone comes over for the bachelor and bachelorette party, and Belly is trying her best to make it seem like she's okay with hooking Conrad up with someone else, up until she finds out that he was the one that convinced her mom to come to the wedding, and now she's having a full-blown panic attack because she can't stop thinking about it. She finally confronts him in this super dramatic scene on the beach where Conrad tells her that Jeremiah couldn't meet up with her because he was blackout drunk, and he also tells her about the cheating in Cabo, which she already knew about. And he was shocked that she was just okay with that and now marrying him after just a few short months later, which I thought was bizarre too, buddy, let me just tell you. But he finally admits his true feelings, that he still loves her. He knows he's being a crappy brother to admit this, but he tells her not to marry Jeremiah. But of course, being the super stubborn person that she is, she tells him to his face that Jeremiah has always been there for her, and he's always been a better friend to her than he has, and what they had was nothing. And obviously that wasn't true. That hurt her to say, but the next day he tries to tell her to just forget what happened the other night so that they can move on with the wedding. But she's blowing a fuse. However, what the heck did you expect from him? She calls him heartless, but my darling, you're the one who was going back and forth between him and his own brother. Secretly seeing Conrad at the beach house every now and again and not telling Jeremiah. playing with this man's feelings. Don't get me wrong, he played with hers too, but let's be real, it was nowhere near the level that Belly was playing on, going back and forth between brothers. The delusion is out of this world. You're out here lying to yourself, thinking that you're going to be able to force yourself to love Jeremiah just as much or more than you did Conrad because of one kiss in a pool a couple years ago. And now you're out here marrying someone who literally just cheated on you a few months ago. Yeah, okay. She finally tells Jeremiah all about it, and he automatically jumps to her wanting to jump ship. Then she turns things on him, and it's just looking really sketch as to where this could be going because this man just disappears the morning of the wedding. Why she felt the need to tell him this ish the night before is beyond my understanding. I would have taken that secret to my grave. But Conrad finds him, they have their little fight, but Jeremiah tells him that he doesn't want him at the wedding and never wants to see him again. Oh, the theatrics. But even Taylor tells Belly not to get married to Jeremiah because she thinks she lost herself in him. And I totally agree. Finally, someone said it. And when Belly and Jeremiah finally talk, he tells her something pretty profound and necessary in that moment. He says, "You can't marry me to erase him." And I feel like that's what she was doing the entire time they were off and on with each other. It always felt like she was only with him to stop thinking about Conrad. They call off the wedding and Belly ends up going to Paris, but not before seeing Conrad sitting near the gate, looking like he was contemplating his whole life. But he doesn't see her and she doesn't say anything either. He tries to make things right with Jeremiah, but of course it's too soon. But Belly ends up making friends in Paris and staying while working under the table because she doesn't exactly have a visa and whatnot. But Thanksgiving comes around. It's so interesting how Jeremiah was just kind of throwing himself at other women, and Conrad is just over here trying to figure out how to get Belly back. But I think she honestly needed this break from everyone to just kind of live life without all the drama that she did partially cause, mind you, but drama nonetheless. And she's finally able to start thinking a lot more clearly. And that's when she also meets Benito. But back at home, Jeremiah ends up getting himself cut off from Daddy's money. He gets his own job, tries to move on, but claims he can't forgive Conrad or talk to him. But regardless, Conrad is out here writing Belly love letters low-key. However, she's not answering, starts things up with Benito, and now it looks like there's a path for her to stay in Paris permanently with a visa and a good paying job. Jeremiah and Conrad finally talk on the anniversary of their mom's death, and of course Belly comes up. But Conrad asks how he was able to sleep with someone and cheat on her if she was his whole world like he claimed. And he says that it was because he found out that Belly and Conrad had been hanging out at the beach house during Christmas. And I was like, I don't really think that justifies any of your actions, but it was even crazier still that he probably thought by proposing and getting married to her that he could take her away from Conrad for good. But Conrad was on a roll. He even brings up how Jeremiah was acting pretty selfish as well. Only a month after he'd broke up with Belly, Jeremiah was right there to get with her. But in the end, Jeremiah finally admits that he really was just trying to keep a hold of her. But it just didn't seem like true love though. It just sounded like he saw her as more of a thing to possess. But the two brothers do end up making up, sort of. He gives Conrad another go-ahead with Belly, and then Conrad ends up heading to Paris, and you could tell that she missed him, but also didn't really want to talk to him. But she plays tour guide for a little while, trying to ignore the fact that he really just wanted to see her and didn't really care about the sights at all. But she invites him to her little birthday shindig. They get together with her friends, and things are pretty tense between him and Benito, but it turns out that she had broken things off with him a few weeks before that anyway. Now, after her party, they dance under the moonlight, and of course she didn't move on. They make out all up in the taxi on the way back to her apartment, and then Conrad says something corny about having a dream about this and her. And then of course Belly follows up with how she used to wish she could be with him every time she blew out her candles on her birthday cake. Now they're trying to figure out what to do with them living in two different sides of the world, and even Conrad's reaction, it was so calm. He didn't want her to give up her life in Paris, while Jeremiah was super angry about everything, telling her not to call him ever again. But Belly's attitude after this whole thing is just off. This man pours his heart out to her, and of course she's still overthinking and isn't sure about him, even though she blew up Jeremiah's whole life a few times because of him. So he leaves for his train to Brussels, and now she's out here running after taxis, trying to catch him before he leaves. She runs up on his train, and they have their little moment, and a little while later, they both return to the beach house where the whole story kind of started, which was a nice little touch. But I still have some things that I would like to say, some thoughts, even though I did indeed inject them here and there in this video already. But are y'all really trying to tell me that y'all did all this back and forth, caused all this carnage and destruction, just to go right back to each other in the end? Seriously? For most of the 3 seasons, I was like, I think I want to quit because this is just getting stupid. But then I was like, you know what? I'm already halfway in. I have to commit. But Lord, this was hard to watch. I'm happy that everyone found someone, but I feel like if you have so much going against your relationship and your own mother, who's usually really supportive of your decisions, also isn't on board, it might be time to reevaluate. But let me know your thoughts on this show if you had similar feelings, because there were just moments where I genuinely wanted to scream, where I was so annoyed. But let me know your thoughts if you were one of those unfortunate souls that got caught up in this unnecessary roller coaster of emotions down below.